that's such an interesting point. You were talking before about how you didn't share the same necessarily like optimism about this potential within MAGA. And, I certainly didn't think like, oh, well, look, they're all saying anti-interventionism. There's going to be no war under Trump. I knew it, but, it was going to be just aside from the fact that the Israel lobby is still very powerful. A lot of these people have been fed on traditional Republican politics for a long time about wars in the Middle East. I do think you're right that this idea, how quickly the Israelis are pressuring the United States to go to war with Iran, I think has galvanized a lot of the willingness to kind of speak up here. We're to the point where Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about the prospect of war with Iran and has Charlie Kirk. But Marjorie Taylor Greene said when talking about this, she said, I'm really sick and tired of having the United States have to go and fight wars for other countries in the Middle East that have large nuclear arsenals and a sophisticated army. And it's like, gee, Marjorie, who might you be talking about when you say we have to fight other wars for a country with a large nuclear arsenal in the Middle East? These kind of thoughts have been pretty taboo, especially in right-wing politics mainstream right-wing politics for a long time. And you're seeing it now. On the other hand, let me just give you a counterexample. You have Governor Greg Abbott, who is the Republican two-term governor of Texas. He was one of the people who championed that bill I mentioned before that requires you to pledge that you're not going to boycott Israel. He actually issued an executive order, I think in the early to mid 2024 in response to these protests, proclaiming that he was banning anti-Semitism in Texas, which is so funny because the right has been mocking liberal politicians for thinking they can purge the society of racism through government acts, but it was basically the same thing. But there was this interesting event where this small city of the city of San Marcos in Texas had done some sort of analysis where they were able to calculate, I think based on how much the state spends in their per capita of what they pay in taxes, that $4 million of their tax money, this little small city with a lot of problems, is being sent to Israel. And so they introduced a resolution saying, we're not going to allow this $4 million to be shipped overseas to some foreign country. This is for our people and our residents and our well-being and the well-being of our community. And, representing this sort of what I think is this growing resentment at how much this is being shoved down people's throat. And Greg Abbott that day was enraged, and he issued a statement, the title of which was Anti-Israel Policies Are Anti-Texas Policies, which I'd love to hear someday someone explain. Why are why if you say you're against the Israeli war in Gaza, is that anti-Texas? But the letter was filled with threats like, how dare you, try and stop your tax money from going to Israel. And you can debate the particulars of whether a city has the right to try and reorganize this money, whatever. I mean, there's little technicalities there. But the spirit of this, to be in the middle of Texas and be like, why is our tax, I always felt like this MAGA rhetoric was eventually on a collision course with financing Israel, with doing everything we can for Israel. I'd have a lot of MAGA people on my show during the Ukraine war, and they would say they were against it. And I would say, why? Luring them into it. And they would say, oh, we have to stop financing other countries' wars. They can take care of themselves. We have to take care of money, use this money to take care of everything in our community, including Marjorie Taylor Greene and RFK Jr. and many others. And I would say, wow, that's really interesting. Does that same rationale apply to Israel and are sending all the money there? And they would stutter around knowing that they couldn't answer it, but also not yet ready politically to say, yeah, Israel is included in that. And now you see that. So I wonder from your perspective, have all these measures, including the ones that you so expertly analyzed and warned about today, it's just tsunami of them, including what I just read from Greg Abbott. Do you think that they realize there is a danger that they're kind of forcing people to start asking these questions that they previously kind of hid from them? God, why is it that our politicians are constantly demanding we do things from Israel? And why are they silencing us and censoring us and sending our money over there? Why is it so focused and obsessive on Israel? Do you think that is changing the political climate some?
That Texas story, that I hadn't heard that before, and that is weird. Yeah, that's something else. No, well, look, as someone who is proudly works for Reason Magazine, I will say censorship does not work. I think that's an important bottom line, that when you try to shut up healthy discussion about a topic, that it ensures there's going to be a lot of resentment and unhealthy things coming out. I think we are for sure seeing that. I think politicians' reactions are very typical of politicians in these kinds of repressive contexts on any issue, where you see that the kids don't agree with you, and then you sort of try something very ham-handed to get them to shut up, and then you wonder, oh, why don't they like this? I think this is very common around the world, when power is threatened, to sort of reach for repressive measures and then be kind of confused when people get resentful of that. I do think that there is a sort of older and perhaps unsustainable sort of cultural reverence for Israel that is kind of unique out of all foreign policy issues. I mean, we could talk about that for a long time. And I think, again, like, I think for the older generation, this does not come off as weird. I think it comes off as like something very natural and something very near and dear to their identity. And I will add that it's, I just want to be clear, like, this is not Jewish Americans who are necessarily like this. Joe Biden was like this. Greg Abbott, who's Christian, very Christian, is like this. And
there's a big evangelical component to it for sure, and a big kind of national security component.
And I think there is also a sort of like post-World War II liberalism that does see Israel as sort of like the response to Nazism. It's like Israel's the anti-Nazism, so if you're anti-Israel, that means you're anti-Nazi. Which, of course, it's very different in the Middle East, and there's a whole other context. But the war on terror just sort of reinforced that when you had people talking about like Islamofascism.
Yeah, this attempt to always say, oh, look, your enemies are our enemies. So you should go to war to stop our enemies because they're also your enemies. You see that now with Netanyahu always saying, oh, you know what they chant in Iran? Death to America, death to Israel. You're the great Satan. So this attempt to kind of conflate all of this has been successful for a long time. I just really question whether it's can continue to be. And one of the worst things, if you depend on a certain belief being pervasive in the culture, it's very scary if you're, say, Israel, to watch, basically just older people who are going to be dying off in the next, like, few years, couple decades, whatever, and everyone who's replacing them is feeding on this steady diet of increasingly going in the opposite direction. I think that's part of why you're seeing almost like a desperate attempt to just impose these previously unthinkable measures that are designed to control the public debate in a way that they've made it almost overt, which I also agree. We just saw the liberals have that problem, like that whole censorship scheme on almost every issue caused the public to resent it and go in the other direction. And I really do think you're seeing that with Israel now. All right. Well, Matthew, it was great to have you on. I really encourage everybody to read your article because there are some, like the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act is a pretty straightforward thing. You can just understand it quickly and why it's so menacing. This one's a little more complicated to understand, especially with the background, but I actually agree with you that it's even more sinister, like it's more shocking on its face because you're talking about criminal penalties here, like felonies that could send people up to 20 years in prison, and the Congress just seemed to be like, yeah, this is a normal bill, let's be on our way to passing this. So I really want to encourage people to go to Reason and read it, and we'd love to have you back on the show. It was great speaking to you tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very glad to have been on, and I really appreciate the invite. And my family's texting me screenshots of this because they're also fans of you.
All right, well, tell everybody I said hello. Really appreciate that. That's nice to hear. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.